What's up, gangsters? How about some random? Okay, so I have not done a randoms thing in I think a couple of weeks, and it's because I've been super focused and it's been kind of intense. And this right here is what it's been all about. These obviously are invasion stripes on the wings of my Spitfire, and some dudes who have been following along in Scale Modeler's critique group know how I got here, but for those that maybe have not, here's what it's been all about. There are things in scale modeling that are, I don't know, like considered, I don't know if sacrosanct is the right word, or white whales or big obstacles, whatever they are. There are things that are sort of universally recognized, at least within particular genres, as being almost unattainable. Maybe that's the right word. One of those things, for example, is natural metal finishes. Those things are hard, and I've explored that a lot and still not ever felt fully satisfied. But that's a whole other story. Another one of those things is hand-painted invasion stripes. You guys know, if you talk about invasion stripes pretty much in any model-making group, you're going to start an argument because inevitably somebody is going to say, oh yeah, they were painted with them there mops and buckets, and they look, they were never masted, whatever. That's just not true. Some of them were definitely painted that way. I don't know that anybody's ever seen any evidence of them actually being painted with mops. I don't know where that came from. But there are definitely pictures of ground crew guys painting sloppy invasion stripes with, big old 6-inch house paint brushes. And who knows what kind of paint they use. Bottom line is, a lot of them were done the night before the D-Day invasion. They didn't have a lot of time to do them right. But on the other hand, you don't have to look very hard to find plenty of photographs of aircraft, particularly American aircraft, where they were obviously well masked and sprayed and are nice and straight. But the issue with, making them look hand-painted is that it's hard to show a hand-painted thing at scale without making it look like you just don't know how to paint. And people have tried and failed, or at least failed to make it look authentic or make it look good. And my theory has always been that if you could do it in scale, that should just be a matter of how you do the hand painting. That as long as the rest of the effects are appropriately controlled, and anybody who knows what they're looking at should be able to look at the entire picture and say, oh, okay, this is not a case of somebody who just doesn't, know how to paint. This was done intentionally, and it's to represent the whole hand-painted thing. So anyway, I started experimenting. I posted a bunch of pictures of this little test mule thing. My first one, I hand-painted the whole stripe layout, and I very purposefully emphasized the shittiness of them. And it was a resounding failure, like hundreds of comments. There was a bunch of them I posted in the Tamiya group because I just wanted to kind of get high-level feedback, yes or no, does it read correctly? And there were hundreds of comments, and some of them were, obviously just trolls and haters who just wanted to laugh about it. And then there's just, a lot of skepticism and arguments about whether or not they were hand-painted or whatever. And then there are, dudes who were just like, look, I just can't tolerate it. My OCD won't let me, and that's fine. I get that. But all of that just spurred me on to keep after it. And so I washed off the first set. The second set, I did a kind of a combination of effects. There were people who were suggesting mask it so that the edges look rough, and then spray it, and then use oils. And what I ended up doing was masking it off and spraying a really light layer of white on it just so that I could see the edges when I removed the tape. Because drawing the lines with a pencil wasn't working very well. That was a pain in the ass. The surface of this MRP was just a little too slick for a pencil mark to register. So once I had the basic layout where I could see it, I came back and I airbrushed a tight pattern of black and white just to give me a base coat for the brush painting that was going to come. Because what I found with the brush painting was I just couldn't get good enough coverage. It just looked like shit. It really did. They were, the people who said it didn't look good were correct. And I take all that feedback on board. So once I had the sort of it was almost like black basing, where I kind of marbled in an uneven coverage, but still enough that the brush painting wasn't going to have to do all the work. Then I came back and brush painted them, and I brush painted them as best I could, and basically just counted on the limits of my ability to hold a straight line pretty much to tell the story. And so that's what I've got here. And I felt like if I could do it on this 1/48th scale sample, that I could probably pull it off at 1/32, and that's what is going on here. And you can see, the lines are a little bit wavy, the edges aren't perfect, but I didn't do anything really to overemphasize that. And it's a subtle effect, but I feel like it tells the story. And I've been posting this daily, and at a certain point, it flipped where the feedback started to be positive. Yeah, you've captured the look, and so I feel pretty good about it. It's been intense and it's been wearing me out. Hand painting these things was pretty time consuming, and I still have to do the fuselage. But I feel like that the work was worth it. You can see that I've done a lot of weathering on these stripes already, and that's been honestly primarily with sandpaper. All of this chipping that I didn't have time to talk about in the last random segment, this is all hairspray chipping done in what's basically the normal fashion. And I did a whole long-ass video about hairspray chipping with lacquers, because it is a little bit different than chipping with acrylics. But that's all normal. And with these, I found out pretty quickly, this is MRP, by the way, that I used. It brush paints pretty well. Very well, in fact, and I discovered that I could brush paint it over a layer of hairspray, but I wasn't really getting the effect I wanted. It was coming off in chunks that were too big, and what I really wanted to replicate was some kind of crappy house paint that had just been worn away and abraded by lots and lots of foot traffic. So I didn't want so much chipping as a sort of a fading effect. And as I've done in other cases, I used a lot of sanding to create that. And it's been a combination. Honestly, you can see over here are some of my tools. Sandpaper, toothbrush, fiberglass scratch brush. But honestly, it's been mostly sanding. And what I've done is use these fantastic Infini sanding sticks and this green UMP buffer. I don't know what it is about this thing, but it will rip paint off. I mean, it just, man, it goes through it super quick, sometimes too quick. But it does a great job of creating a faded look, especially with these lacquers. And then what I do is I come back and I get a little bitty chunk of, this is 1500 grit sanding sponge in my gripper tweezers, so I can come along and tune up certain areas. Like I posted the picture of this, and one of the guys in Scale Modelers Critique Group said, hey, I see a little bit of a repeating pattern. And as soon as I hear that, I'm on it, because I don't want repeating patterns unless, like I've said, there's a reason for it, like these rivets or panel lines or whatever. So I'll then use this little bitty piece of sanding sponge to tune up specific areas, and it works great. But I feel like that at this point that I'm about ready to move forward with the fuselage stripes, And the next step with these will be the panel lines, and that's going to be a lot of work. Panel lines and rivets. And then I will put a flat coat on it. I should have mentioned this doesn't really have any clear coats yet, but I did put some Guns GX100 clear gloss lacquer just in this area right here on both sides, because I knew that when I started attacking this with some water and the fiberglass scratch brush, that I might do more chipping to the camo paint underneath, and I didn't want to do that. So I just locally sprayed that gloss clear lacquer as a barrier for that, and that worked out really well. Anyway, after I do all the panel line washes, then it'll be a flat coat, probably just dull coat, and then it'll be ready for some localized oil work, and then it'll be home free, almost to the finish line. And that's the finish line for this, because that's 11 minutes. Bye.